Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet, and today I'm doing a book review. This is a review that has been a long time coming. I've had this book for a while, and if you've read the title of the video, you already know what this is. This is a review of Something's Missing by Donovan Steele. This is a book that was sent to me by its author, Mr. Donovan Steele, a while back. That was in, I want to say that was in March? Possibly February. Pretty sure it was March, though. Donovan is somebody I met through Girly Gore's horror movie club. Really nice guy, and was kind enough to just send me a copy of his book. And without further ado, this is going to be not as in-depth as, my movie reviews, but I am going to run over everything I can in this and give you my overall thoughts. So the summary on the back of the book says, "A man's failing marriage with his sick wife turns macabre when he begins receiving bone fragments from a blackbird every morning." And that is essentially what the story is. You've got this guy whose life just generally sucks. He's got this day job that he hates. He's got this wife who's hospitalized early on in the book. It's very likely she's not going to make it. He's got some alcohol problems, some drug problems, and you get the sense that he's losing it a little bit. And in the midst of all of that, for no apparent reason whatsoever, this blackbird starts showing up with bone fragments, and over the course of the book, he starts piecing them together and realizing they form a whole skeleton. And without really knowing why, he suddenly becomes fixated on the skeleton, and it's like his mission to complete the skeleton and figure out who it belonged to, and it becomes very important in his head. And the most striking thing about this book is probably the writing style. It is what I would describe as poetry as prose. It is this very verbose, dramatic word style that makes mundane things sound almost surreal and then will turn on a dime and become suddenly very blunt and very mundane again. And just to give an example of that, I'm going to turn to a random page of the book and maybe read you a little bit of the dialogue. "I stand amidst the open world and I am alone. No clouds, no cars, no sense of life anywhere, and the earth allows me to connect. The dark-circled daydream collapses. I return inside and begin getting ready for the workday ahead. Mentally, I won't be able to reach back into my former thought processes after my escapades the other night and the incompletion in the basement. Dire needs and angst beat at my temples. I rub them gently, but with a sense of building pressure, and I set my mind to a black screen filled with little flashes of blue and red electric stars bursting atop the blindness." And this is early on in the book, before things really start to go downhill and descend into madness. And that is probably one of the book's biggest assets. It is able to take these very mundane situations and describe their mundanity and this guy's general unhappiness with his life in this really poetic way that gets at the heart of his emotions and also really taps into just sensory things. You get an idea of the way things sort of feel, the texture of things, even the smells of things, and what this character's brain equates those images and textures and smells with, which really help to paint a vivid picture of what's going on in the story. And I think our main character is very interesting in that he is doing some pretty awful things throughout the book, but partly because you are in his shoes, you still relate to him and find him somewhat likable. But it's also because he still absolutely loves his family, and in particular his daughter. He will just do anything to protect his daughter and keep her safe, even as he goes down this really dark path in his desperation to complete the mission given to him by the blackbird. The daughter is also a very likable character. I love the dynamic between the two of them. It's very playful, but it's clear that there's just this great love between them, and that makes some of the horrible things that are done in the book that much more heartbreaking, and there's this sense that it might be putting a strain on that relationship. And then there are just the really weird, surreal things that I am still trying to figure out what they meant. For example, there's a character, I believe it is the main character's brother, who shows up, and early on during his visit, the main character just flat out kills him. And then the character comes back and continues to come back and talk to our main character. And I'm actually on a page where he says, "I'll kill him again when he's not looking." So this is just a thing that happens over and over. He's visited by his brother, who he will kill every time he visits, and he just keeps coming back. It kind of feels like the Cain and Abel characters from Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics in some ways to me, but within this context where it is entirely possible that the main character has just lost his mind, but the story is so subjective that there's no way of knowing that for sure. And then there's just this blackbird that keeps coming by the house with pieces of this human skeleton that this guy is starting to assemble in his basement. And we don't know why, but it just keeps coming back. It is something that gets him away from the horrors of his everyday life, and so it becomes this fixation for him and this sort of escape, to the point that it becomes an unhealthy obsession and, in his eyes, his life's mission, and he will do anything, and I mean anything, to make that happen. As for the things I didn't care for as much in this book, I said that the poetry as prose way it's written is one of its assets. It's also one of its biggest downfalls for me, because sometimes it'll just get so symbolic that I'll have to read the same passage a few times to realize what's actually happening in the scene, because it's just like, wow, that was gorgeous flowery language, but it's so flowery that I'm struggling to wrap my brain around what's actually happening in this particular scene. There's also a downside to the very vivid sensory description of things, just for me personally, because there are some very graphic sex scenes in this book that I did not enjoy reading, and if you are of the squeamish persuasion and you don't want to read that, I don't especially recommend this, or if you do read this, just kind of breeze through those particular passages. They were well written, and they were not pointless sex scenes, which feel like an even more cardinal sin in a book than they do in a movie for me. They actually have reasons for happening and reveal things about the characters participating in them, but they were a bit graphic for my tastes. There's also a downside to the just kind of surreal nature of it for me, which is I'm really not sure what this book is meant to be about, per se. I think I've kind of touched on the heart of it to some extent just in describing what happens, but the surrealist in me loves that there's no clear reason for any of what's happening, but the storytelling traditionalist in me wants this book to make more sense and for there to be kind of, even if it's not a logical reason, just a emotional, plot-driven reason for it specifically to be a blackbird delivering bones. And maybe there is a symbolic reason for that, intentional or unintentional. If there is one, J. Donovan, please let me know, but there was just something in me trying to rationalize what was happening in some way, and it just wasn't working. Also, I forgot to mention that the ending of this book is wild, and it brings back a motif from earlier in the book in a really big and really disturbing way. So overall, there were things about this book that didn't quite work for me, but overall it was a really intriguing read, and I wouldn't call it fun. It's a very depressing book, but it was a worthwhile read. It's also very short. You can read this one in a very short amount of time. I do absolutely recommend picking this one up, and once again, a huge thank you to J. Donovan for sending it to me. I will be linking his YouTube channel either in the cards or in the description, and in the description, I'm going to try and find a place where you can buy this book, and I will link that there. That is my review of Something's Missing by J. Donovan Steele. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!